I think what I've seen on average is somewhere between 20 and 30% is the average rate of win across a sales organization.
Well, all of a sudden, if you've gone through some private equity transaction and, now you're the CEO of a company that's got 100 million in revenue, you've got 3,000 customers. There's no way that you can personally be the person who goes on every sales call and takes every help desk call.
You've got a mindset shift and you've got to qualify and you've got to have people that you rely on. And it's hard because this is your baby, right? This is usually something that you've created in the organization.
The Modern Selling Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast. And I am so excited to bring you a new year of all about modern selling and engaging with your target buyers. This is our kickoff show of the new season. We are in our 8th season now, if I'm not mistaken, top 1.5% of all podcasts globally. And I've got you, the Modern Selling Nation, to thank. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Now, my guest today is a very special friend of mine, and I'm excited to actually spend some time with him. Welcome to the show, JD Miller. Now, JD Miller is an executive advisor for 5 Arrows, which is a private equity company. They've got a portfolio of about, I think it was 36 companies that he's working on in terms of strategies for sales and marketing. Maybe one day they might be our private equity investor. Who knows? With that in mind, today, a huge event just happened, and that is he's launched his new book called The CRO's Guide to Winning in Private Equity, and it is available at jdmillerphd.com. We're going to talk all about it today. JD, welcome to the show, my man.
Thanks for having me, Mario. It's great to be here.
Excited to be here. Do me a favor. I told a little bit about your background, but tell the audience, the Modern Selling Nation, a little bit about yourself, and then I've got a very special question I want to ask you.
Sure. So I began tech sales about 25 years ago at a very small .com. I was employee number 26 there, and we grew to be the world's largest tech IPO until Google took the title from us. We went public with a $9 billion valuation. And so over the next 25 years, I've just wanted to repeat that experience over and over again. So I moved up the ranks from being a sales engineer to a seller, ultimately CRO, CMO a bunch of times, country president a few times. I've been through 6 PE exits owned by private equity firms. And now I get to work for a PE firm itself, 5 Arrows Capital Partners, where I either sit on the boards of companies or I'm a coach or advisor to the sales and marketing leaders of the companies that we own.
Fantastic. And you just had something really cool that just happened. I obviously stole your thunder, but you've launched a new book, The CRO's Guide to Winning in Private Equity, and it just launched. Congratulations on that. People can go and download or buy a copy actually on jdmillerphd.com, or is it available on Amazon as well?
It's everywhere. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, every Books A Million, everywhere fine books are sold.
Fantastic. So a little bit about that book. What was the background about writing this book? And then I do still have my very special question I want to ask you.
Okay, sure. So, in my work, I find myself coaching and mentoring sales leaders, and they tend to have a lot of the same questions over and over again. How do we do comp plans? How do we set our annual plan? What's a great sales methodology? And so on and so forth. And I found myself, kind of providing the same answers and coaching and guidance. So eventually I put it together in a book. There are about a dozen templates that you can use to plan your year or write comp plans, and then a whole lot of kind of how-to practical advice that any sales leader in a tech company can pick up and use and put into play to be more successful this year.
Very good. And my special question I ask all my guests, JD, is centered around tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they're looking at any or all of your social profiles.
Oh, that's a great question. So I am a licensed food sanitation manager, which means that every 4 years I go spend 40 hours in cooking and restaurant management classes. And I got into that actually through some work I do with homelessness in Chicago. I spun a homeless organization off from a church about 15 years ago. It's now called Care for Friends. But someone in the organization needs to carry a restaurant license because we serve about 150 hot meals a day. And so that it began as me. Of course, now we've got a great staff. But I wound up learning how to do chocolate with the Four Seasons dessert people and just kind of love that piece of keeping that credential going. So constantly 40 hours a year of cooking training.
So the license is, wait, food sanitation? What is
Yes.
that one? The certificate or the license again?
It's called the Food Sanitation Manager. So it officially would be I could be the person in the restaurant that oversees the kitchen and makes sure that you're not going to poison anyone or kill anyone. But it's a class that real restaurant owners have to go through constantly. And so I always wind up, in our practicals, standing next to, famous chefs in Chicago as they're renewing their certificates. And, I've picked up some good cooking tips along the way from them.
Well, there you go. I had no idea that was even a thing that somebody could do, get a certification for it. You learn something new every day. So that's interesting. And what made you want to do that?
So as part of this work I do with a homeless organization, we serve about 150 people a hot meal every day. And so, it does make us a food service facility that Chicago's food inspector comes and checks out our kitchen. And someone has to have that license to certify that we're following all the right rules.
Well, that makes sense. Interesting. So, a philanthrop
Pissed.
yeah, or someone who's very giving. How about that? Obviously, modern selling nation. I can't use the words. That's all. There we go. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, let's get into some nitty gritty. We spend a lot of time. Obviously, both us, myself, and yourself have worked with a number of different CROs and CMOs, and you've got a portfolio of 36 companies that are under the Five Arrows portfolio of companies. Redo that one, Charlie. Portfolio of companies. And you spend a lot of time with the different leaders inside the organization. And as I think about this topic of, the CRO guide to winning in private equity, one of the biggest challenges that we see in a lot of companies is that sales and marketing seem to be adversaries or
No.
never on the same. Yeah, exactly. No, or at least never on the same page. How does a how does an organization bridge that divide? How do you advise these CROs and CMOs to bridge that divide, if you would?
Yeah, great question. So for me, it's about creating what a good CMO taught me a long time ago, a marketing culture in your organization. And so, whether they're both reporting to me as CRO or I'm running sales and someone else is running marketing, I really want to make sure that our team thinks of ourselves as the marketing team or the sales and marketing team. And as an enablement professional, how hard it can be to get everyone on the same page. But really creating a marketing culture is making sure everyone in sales and marketing thinks they're on the same team and that they're getting aligned on the same goals, metrics, and incentive plans. So I'll tell you a quick story. I've been working with a company right now where sales is not doing particularly well. Almost none of their sellers made their quota. It's a company I was just talking to. Is a potential let me back this one up. Um, okay. So, for example, I was just talking to a colleague at an organization who says they've been struggling with this in their practice, and so the sales team has been really struggling to hit their goals. Very few people qualified for Sales Club this year, but when you look on the marketing side of the house, everyone is getting their annual bonus this year because they've created all of the MQLs that each of their comp plans said they needed to achieve. And so something has been mismatched where the marketing team thinks that they need to create this number of MQLs for the company to hit its goal, but somehow on the end, it's not turning into accepted opportunities and closed deals. So the sales team, feels like they're losing. Creating this marketing culture is really aligning everyone on what's the company goal, what are all the things that get us there, and how do we make sure that my incentive and your incentive are lined up, that when each of us do the things that you've been asked to do, the company's going to win at the end. So it can be really tricky in the beginning of the year to kind of do all that math, but it's having this constant conversation between sales and marketing and then the rest of the company on, what's the ultimate end goal of the company? And then how do our individual departments and individual contributions support that? And are they all on track?
Hmm, that's an interesting one. So, question, in the companies that you work with, Does the CRO oversee marketing, or is the CRO now just a new glorified title for chief sales officer?
I think it varies all over the place. And in my own career, I've seen that, multiple times. Sometimes I've been a CRO, which is just a head of sales, and I have a really strong marketing peer. Sometimes, especially with mid-market tech companies that maybe can't afford to have two executives, sometimes the CRO runs sales and marketing. Or if you're in a particularly high growth organization, people have said, we all want that aligning up to the same person. Um, for me, at the end of the day, I don't really care about the reporting structure, but it's really important that we've aligned either those leaders or the team members underneath the leaders on what are we trying to do together. You work in lead generation, so you know better than I. Takes like 17 touches to turn a cold prospect into someone who's going to take a sales call with you. And a lot of times, there's a lot of different people doing that. Marketers are sending out email campaigns and there's banner ads that we see, on the top of LinkedIn. BDRs are making cold calls and sending emails. Sellers are sending, LinkedIn connections and making calls and so on. And at the end of the day, the prospect's going to respond to one of those and say, I want to take a meeting. Now, in a lot of organizations, there's all of this like credit claiming about, well, I made the call, so it must have been an outbound lead. Or, the last thing they did is they came to the website, so it must have been an inbound lead. I think that's the wrong kind of discussion to have. The more important discussion is what were all of those 17 touches that added up to getting us there? Marketing does some, SDRs do some, sales do some. And can we agree on what that looks like? And if we agree about that, then it really doesn't matter. Does marketing report to the CRO? Do those BDRs report to sales or marketing? Because if we're all just thinking about ourselves as marketers who share the same process, we're all going to win.
Okay. All right. I like your point there. I tend to lean on the side of, first off, a chief revenue officer should have all revenue, which includes marketing and sales, or you have a CMO and a CSO, because those two roles are very different. But if you have a chief revenue officer, in my opinion, they should have both marketing and sales. Nonetheless, there should never be a circumstance where marketing is getting bonuses, but sales is not. Back to your original point, that should never happen because essentially, if we're all smarketers, which I use that term all the time as well, if we're all smarketers, then marketing is producing not only the leads, but the right type of leads that are going into the sales funnel. And marketing has a funnel and sales has a funnel. As soon as marketing puts that lead into an SQL status, it now goes into the sales funnel, which is basically taking it and qualifying it and then moving it into a demo and then moving into a pursue opportunity and then pricing and proposal, contract, etc. So each of these funnels, one goes feeds the other essentially, or one's on top of the other. And I find it very challenging when I see CMOs that are celebrating their success about the number of leads that they're producing. And you look at it and you say, not a single one of them has closed into an opportunity, right? That's pathetic. And so my challenge inside of that is you're not aligned. And two, if I was the CSO or the CRO overseeing the marketing team, if sales doesn't hit their quota and or their number, marketing doesn't hit their quota and number. And the quotas or the alignment of how I'm measuring you is not based upon how many leads you produce. No, that's the wrong. It's based upon whether or not the company hits the goal. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. And, I talk about this in the book too, but one of the metrics that I really like to align on in every organization that I work on is sales velocity. And so, it's the number of opportunities times the size of the opportunity times your win rate, maybe your marketing conversion rate, divided by the number of days in your sales cycle. And it sort of breaks us down into, how much revenue are you producing on a daily basis or a weekly basis or whatever that is. But I think that we need to align everyone around the sales velocity goal, the company's goal for that, even though individual team members are going to be responsible for different components of that. So a couple of jobs ago, I was recruited in, and they said, you're going to be the CRO, you're going to have sales and marketing reporting to you, but really we think there's a sales problem here. We're not seeing the revenue that we've seen in years past, and we think you're going to have to do a whole new sales playbook and train your sellers. And I got in and I started looking at the sales velocity metrics. Actually, that team was winning about 32% of the time, which felt really good to me. And then I looked over on the marketing side, and they were converting. Right, they were converting really well MQL to SQL too. And so the marketers were like, "We're doing really well." So what had changed in their business is the size of the deal that they were creating was suddenly a whole lot smaller year over year. And it was the start of the economy was getting a little soft. And so they were still, finding the right ICP, but those ICPs didn't have as many employees as they used to have. Or once they became a customer, they weren't calling as frequently saying, "Hey, we just hired 10 more people. We need 10 more licenses." Um, but it could be really easy if you're not thinking about marketing the right way, for sales to just say, "Well, if we're not hitting the company goal, it must be marketing is terrible." And for marketing to be like, "Oh no, the salespeople are no good." At the end of the day, actually, they were both doing really well. They weren't aligned on what the deal size was. And so the intervention wasn't really fix sales or fix marketing. It was kind of readjust the ICP that we're targeting and trying a little bit further up market than we ever had before, because that'll correct the deal size and then get us back on our revenue plan.
Great example. I love that. Um, Now, one of the challenges that I think we also face as well, or I think one of the biggest challenges, and I think you talk about this in the book as well, is around some of the specific challenges that are facing our go-to-market professionals, in this case, the sales team, that are in high growth companies. What are some of those what are some of the biggest challenges that are facing these professionals, these sales folks, in high growth companies? But before you answer that question, we're going to listen to this message from our program sponsor right now.
Imagine having the power to identify companies visiting your website, track their behavior in real time, and seamlessly integrate it all with your CRM. Leadfeeder is not just a tool, it's your secret weapon for efficient and targeted lead engagement. What sets Leadfeeder apart? It's the ability to provide detailed insights into visitor behavior, helping your sales team prioritize efforts and close deals faster. With customizable notifications and lead scoring, Leadfeeder is changing the game. Ready to revolutionize your approach to leads and deals? Head over to leadfeeder.com for your free demo today. That's LEADFEEDER.com. Leadfeeder.com. Don't miss out on the future of successful lead generation with Leadfeeder.
Okay, right before that break there from our program sponsor, I was asking you about what are some of the biggest challenges facing go-to-market professionals in high growth companies. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, great question. So for me, in the private equity context, almost all of our portfolio companies are suddenly experiencing growth that they've never seen before. Either they've gotten a lot of PE investment to grow the business, or it's been an investment of bringing a couple of companies together. I know you brought like 6 or 7 companies together all at once. And I think one of the biggest challenges that happens in that environment is the things that you had to do successful when you were really small are generally the opposite of the things that are going to make you successful when you're really large. And so a lot of my work, we talk about the ages and stages of a company. And I'm thinking of a small startup that I just started working with, and they've been acquired into a larger company. But the startup has like 6 sellers. And all of a sudden overnight, they've grown, they've been merged, and it's a team that's got about 50 sellers. Well, if you were one of those core 6 that was there on the very first day, you're used to being the superstar seller and you're involved in every deal. And they've got these comp plans that are designed to really reward longevity of the account. So I have a woman on the team who, signed the first partnership deal, and she's had this kind of legacy comp plan that says, now from that point into perpetuity, every time any customer through this partner signs up, I'm getting commission. And we're having this really difficult conversation around that was a comp plan and that was a sales process that made sense when you were only 6 people trying to sell to the world. Now you're in a company that's got 50 people, and pretty soon we're going to be a company that's got 200 people. So, comp plans are going to be a little bit different. The way that you go sell is going to be a little bit different because also you're not selling to these little mom and pop shops anymore. You've earned the right to sell to the biggest enterprises, and that's going to be a team selling approach. Where I've got to bring other people in. And so, I think a lot of times when people are going through high growth, it's an easy trap to fall into to think, we grew the company to whatever size it is today. We've had this great investment by private equity, and we did it because I did X. And now all of a sudden, I have to give up that winning formula because if I keep doing X, I'm going to be limited at that size forever. So the big challenge is making the mental shift of what worked yesterday is not what's going to work tomorrow. And often it's the opposite of what's going to work for you tomorrow.
Think there's a saying, what got you here won't get you there. And if I'm not mistaken, Marshall, there was a book on that. What got you here won't get you there. What was his name? It was a book that I was given early on in my leadership days. Um, oh my gosh, white hair, white mustache. I can't. What got you here won't get you
Yeah,
there.
Marshall Goldsmith.
Marshall Goldsmith. That's exactly. Yeah, that's right. Uh-huh. And so I think that's essentially what you're saying is as you grow, the mindset has to be what got you here won't get you there. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yep, absolutely. And, it's especially important for founders. A lot of times in Chicago, I work with 1871. It's the Chicago Tech Incubator. So these are really impressive founders of companies going from, a mortgage on their house to bootstrap the company. And then all of a sudden they've got like $1 million or $2 million in revenue. And that person was the, chief cook and bottle washer. Maybe they need to go to my sanitation class too. But, they can write the code, they can sell the deal, they tell all the customers, buy from me, and whenever you have a problem, call in. Well, all of a sudden, if you've gone through some private equity transaction and now you're the CEO of a company that's got 100 million in revenue, you've got 3,000 customers. There's no way that you can personally be the person who goes on every sales call and takes every help desk call. And so, it can be a challenge for the founder or the new CEO or whatever to constantly shift context and look at, you know, what is my environment? What is the environment demand? And then how do I need to adapt? And the people that do that really well have really great careers.
I love what you just said because over the holiday week, one of my enterprise customers, the chief sales officer, sent me a TikTok. And she said I was on TikTok and I saw this video and I immediately thought of you. She's one of our largest customers. And in fact, I'm happy to say that we actually, for the first time in our SaaS history, we signed our first multi-year license contract that was over 100K per year. So that's very exciting. A huge thing. We started with a 1-year agreement and now we moved to a multi-year license opportunity or agreement, excuse me. So she sent me this video and it was a train going on the old railroads, right? It was the old school, like 1960 type of, the train conductor. And coming up on the train, it's going in slow motion, and you see that one of the train tracks, the wood tracks is kind of sticking out on top of the train track right here. So he has another one of the big tracks, and he's coming up to it, and he's holding it, the stick like this, across his shoulder, and as soon as he comes up to it, he hits it, and the thing flops over. And so the tagline on that video was "Life of an Entrepreneur," because the next one that came up was he had to run out and grab it and pull it out, and then throw it off the track, and then jump back on the train. And it just reminds me of exactly what you just said. Is that as a founder, as you're smaller, you're right. You're wearing so many different hats and you really enjoy that time that you spend with your customers. But then all of a sudden you grow and it's like you've got a mindset shift and you've got to qualify and you've got to have people that you rely on. And it's hard because this is your baby, right? This is usually something that you've created in the organization. But that having been said, speaking about, this whole idea of wearing many hats, let's focus back on the CRO. And one of the big challenges that we see with CRO is their length of tenure at an organization. I know you quote the HBR study that shows that the average tenure of a CRO is 18 months. Um, that's sad and pathetic. And no matter what the size of the organization is, even if it's small with a 10-person organization to 1,000-person, it's a full year before you can really evoke change. And then all of a sudden in 6 months, you're out of a job because you didn't invoke the change fast enough. And that's just the beginning. So it drives me crazy when I see this. But what do you think drives the short tenure, and how can a CRO or even a CSO extend that tenure?
Yeah. And, I talk about this a lot in a whole lot of forums. The easy answer is a lot of people think a CRO is losing their job because they didn't get the change done fast enough and the company missed their number. And I actually think from having been in that seat a bunch of times myself, it's not about missing the number. It's about not being able to forecast the number. So, private equity firm comes along, they're investing in a business. They know a lot is going to have to change. They know there's a lot that needs to get fixed up and can grow. And if we've made the decision that we're going to change the head of sales, generally things haven't been going really well. And so you wouldn't expect, and when I've been hired into those environments, you wouldn't expect me to show up on day one and, sales turn around in a month. But what we do want people to be able to do is be able to tell us the roadmap of where are we heading and how long is it going to take to get there and show us the measurements along the way. So for me, I've outlived that 18-month tenure, thankfully, in every job I've ever had. It's not because I've always hit my number, but it's because I've been able to really have good communication with my board that says, here's the number we set out. Here were all of the different assumptions that we're supposed to build up, to get to that result. And now today, here's the measure of each of those. And, we're doing great on customer retention, but we're not doing well on deal size. Or, we're doing great on new logo, but all of a sudden customer sat is really low. And, then the next layer down, customers are upset with this thing and it's going to take, product is going to fix it in 6 months. And so let's agree on the roadmap. And if I can forecast what it's going to look like, there's a lot of tolerance for not hitting the number. The worst thing that happens for a CRO is they go to a board and they say, we're going to do $10 million this quarter and we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And at the end of the quarter, you do 6. And at that point, the board says, well, like, what can I do about this? I've got to cut $4 million overnight. If you can start in the beginning of the quarter and say, we're not going to hit that $10 million goal, I think I can commit to 6. It tells them much earlier on, they've got that whole 90 days to adapt on. Okay, so maybe we won't do this, expenditure. Maybe we open our line of credit, or, if you can give your boards the gift of time to adjust, I don't want to say the number doesn't matter at all, but if you've got some foresight into, what it's going to look like and you give people time to respond, suddenly the actual number isn't quite as important.
The ultimate answer, forecast correctly.
Yes. A friend of mine says, it's not good to miss your number. It is death to miss your forecast. And so whether it's good news or bad news, let's agree on the news. Let's get it out early. And then let's talk about what we're going to do about it. And I think a lot of CROs, especially if they grew up through the sales ranks, they don't want to deliver the bad news. They're used to being the top performer and say, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to pull it out in the end. And that really sets you up in a really bad place. Even if you hit the number, because everyone's like, I was so nervous all the way and I have no idea how you got there. I would much rather you, take me along on the journey and show your work.
And that's a tough one, especially as a CRO, because you're dependent upon a VP, a director, a manager, and reps, or whatever the combination is between you and the rep, on forecasting correctly and identifying those opportunities. It's really tough to be able to get everyone on the same page, which is why you've got to be looking at the multiplier, right? So if your quota is $1 million and you have a 23% close ratio, then you need to be having at a minimum $4 million in the pipeline per rep. And so that's going to help with that forecasting, margin of error, if you would. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's one big piece of it. Of course there's AI technologies out there that really help handicap, looking at your sales force and saying, does this particular seller, JD is always over optimistic and his deals come in 3 weeks late and 20% less than he forecasted. But, Mario always comes out with a surprise and he's 110% in 3 weeks early. So there's tools that can help you with that. There's also a lot of just structure and process of, how do you set up your weekly forecast call and a commitment cadence and a best case cadence and deal inspection and all of that kind of stuff, too helps. But, at the end of the day, hitting your forecast is the piece that the CRO, owes to the board and owes to the rest of the company.
I'm curious. I don't know the answer to this question. Perhaps you, JD. Do you know what the average closing rate is for a seller?
It's all over the map in different industries, but I like to believe if I have and I work in tech, B2B tech SaaS, for my sales teams, if we can win between 30 and 35% of the time, that feels like world-class performance for me in the industries that I work in.
Yeah, I think what I've seen, yeah, I agree with you. That's world-class performance, a third of the deals. I think what I've seen on average is somewhere between 20 and 30% is the average rate of win across a sales organization. Interesting. Interestingly, I actually just ran our numbers on the enterprise side here at the end of the year, and I was really shocked. As a sales influencer, as a marketing influencer, I was really shocked what my numbers were because I thought we were winning way more. I thought we were in that 30 to 35% world class, right? A third of the deals that come through, people buy. The number was 23%. 23% win rate is what we have, of what was what we have. And I was like, wow, I didn't actually think it was that low. Now, the good news is I think that's the average. As I looked up the data points, it's roughly about the average, like 20.
Certainly is respectable. Yes.
Yeah, it's like
Yes.
right there. Like you're doing the pretty much the average. So back to my point of, hey, we need a 4x, pipeline size. You need a 4x pipeline size. If your number is X and you got to hit Y, you got to go 4, 5, 6, so whatever the number is. So you got to build that pipeline up for sure.
That's right. And the most important thing is what it is as your business. I don't care if it's 23 or 18 or 12 or 52. What's important is that you know it and everyone else knows what it is. So now you can build the plan and say, all things being equal, here's what our rate is. This is what this means for opportunities we need to create if we're going to hit this particular growth. And yes, I do want to implement a sales training plan that's going to raise it from 23 to 25 or 27. Or yes, I do want to do this new marketing campaign that's going to bring us more in. But let's build an annual plan based on reality. Let's start the new year looking at, you know, past performance is the best predictor of future performance. And then, over time, let's work on interventions and keep measuring it and see if it improves. But the worst thing a seller can do is show up with, I've got a 23% win rate. I've got, a fixed marketing budget that's only going to, produce this much opportunity, and sign up for a plan with their board or executive team that suddenly says we're going to win 33 or 40% of the time without a plan to get there. That's a CRO who's going to get fired because they set a poor expectation.
Amen to that. Totally get that. Now, I'm going to ask you a very big, wide, open-ended question, and love to hear more about, some of the context behind your book, The CRO Guides to Winning in Private Equity. Key metrics. What are some of the key metrics that really help steer building a great company, a great business?
Yeah. So for me, it does come to the annual plan, and it's breaking down your annual goal into all of the different components. And so, a business, I don't know what your number is for this year, but let's say you're trying to do $20 million of new business next year. You've really got to kind of break that down into components and say, how much of that is going to come from price increases on my renewal? How much of that is going to come from customers buying the second module? How much of that is going to come from brand new logo customers? And really break that 20 million down into each of those things and measure each one of those. And so then in each of those buckets, you've got a monthly cadence for your customer base where you're looking at who's up for renewal, what's the percentage that their contract says your price increase can be, what's their customer sat score, so that you can kind of predict, we're going to churn 3% of them, but we're going to make up, 2.5% of that on price increase. Then you've got a whole set of metrics around your cross-sell and upsell. What's the white space in the organization? What's the average price of adding the second module? How long are those sales cycles? And then same thing on new logo business. What's the average deal? How much effort does it take? Um, and then also, aside from all those kind of sales metrics, all the people things. You know, a lot of organizations make the mistake that say, I've got 25 sellers and I'm going to have 25 sellers all year next year. Someone is going to get married and have a baby. Someone is going to decide that they just don't want to work for you anymore and they're going to quit. So, you're not going to have 25 all year long. Let's predict, how many are going to leave? How long is it going to take HR to backfill that role? And then how long is it going to take the new hire to come back up to speed and perform at the same level the departing employee did? So if we can kind of get a sense of what those metrics look like, what's history been like, and then build an annual plan with, assumptions on each of those, that's what I like to measure week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter, to know if I'm on track or off track to make my plan.
Got it. Okay. So moving into the idea behind um, these key metrics, how to steer it, make this a great company, things you just mentioned. We're now starting the setting of these goals, right? Especially at the beginning of a year.
Yeah.
So this time of the year is when many sellers are considering potentially new roles. How can a CRO really manage attrition? You mentioned, thinking about how long it's going to take to backfill, how many people you think are going to be, let go of the organization, right? So how can a CRO start managing this attrition that is going to happen?
Yeah. So salespeople, especially in the beginning of the year, they're asking themselves a really simple question. Am I going to make money here this year? And do I think I'm going to make more money this year than I did last year? And so what are the levers that we can use for that? First of all, setting an achievable goal for them. Now, I like to run an organization where whatever my company goal is, I've allocated about 20% more in quota. So if I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to sell $100 million, I'm going to assign 120 million in quota to my team members. But I found that teams are really generally happy if about 80% of the sellers are making about 80% of their quota. Because it feels like, hey, I'm doing well here, I'm winning here. And when that happens, there's always a handful of team members who are wildly overperforming. So you've got the one seller at, 200%, and they're running around with the $500,000, $1 million commission check. So that's creating, excitement for folks. But if 80% of the folks feel like I'm getting kind of a B here, they feel like they're close enough to quota that it's a decision they want to, it's a decision that they'll make to continue to stay because they can see the end in sight. So setting quota is really important. The other thing is this is a time of year when people have sales kickoffs. And I really talk a lot, I talk about this in the book too. Like this is a sales event for us as the management to our sellers on why you need to be in this company. And so, yes, we're going to go through a lot of training and we're going to show you new products. We're going to tell you about the new marketing plan and you should be learning some stuff too. But it's also really a time where we're laying out for the sellers, here's the roadmap for how you're going to achieve your number this year. Here's the new product we've launched. Here's the new, marketing campaign or whatever it is. Here's the new sales training that you're going to get. And that's going to increase your likelihood of hitting your quota. And then finally, I really like to roll out for people the same way I set the annual plan with all the little buckets. When I give you your quota as a seller, I like to lay out for you the metrics of how you can get there. So my first year, the first quota I ever had, it was 1.2 million. And my manager told me, you'll get there if you sell 4 small deals, 6 regular sized deals, and 1 slightly larger than normal deal. And that gave me sort of the roadmap to then, take all the sales kickoff training and everything else and say, okay, this marketing campaign knocks this off, this product knocks this off, and it all adds up into how I'm going to win.
Everything you've described leads me to the conclusion that you've got to have some tenure and some experience behind yourself to know these ins and outs and these nuances. But I think a lot of challenges that come are as a result of being new to the role as a CRO. So we've only got a few minutes left. Hopefully you can answer this question in just a couple minutes, but what do you think are some of the biggest challenges and mistakes that new leaders make when they're promoted to this role of CRO?
Thanks for that question. And, that is why I wrote the book, because I learned by making a ton of mistakes. And so part of what I'm trying to do with the book is, give people, here's where I've messed things up and here's a template that'll supercharge you. But I think a lot of times, anyone who's moving, whether into CRO or even just first line sales management, if they grew up from being a seller, often, it's like what we talked about before with what got you here isn't what gets you there. The gut is I want to be in front of customers and I want to be the super seller. And here's all my salespeople who are going to bring deals to me that I'm going to get in and close. And actually, when you're in leadership, like you should have that skill and be able to do that sometimes, because sometimes you have to. But how do we spend much more of our time building the processes, building the systems, and training other people to do that work? Because you will not scale. I'm only one person with, not 24 hours a day to work for my company. You will not scale if every deal has to come through you. So instead, how do you empower and create systems and environments to let what you know how to do really well be driven forward by the rest of the organization?
Well, there you go. And if anybody's interested in getting the book, tell them where to go again.
So my website is a great place, jdmillerphd.com. That will link you off to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Walmart and Books A Million and all the other places that great books are sold. You'll find it in paperback, hardcover, and ebook.
And it's available starting today, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Absolutely. Yes.
Fantastic. So JD, if someone wants to get connected to you or reach out to you or get a hold of you, what's the best way? Is that through email, LinkedIn? What do you think is the best way?
Find me on my website, again, jdmillerphd.com. There's a form there, and it also gives you all the links to my LinkedIn, my social, and everything else. Happy to be connected in whatever platform works for you.
And make sure if you're reaching out on LinkedIn, people, please tell JD, it's JD Miller on LinkedIn. And please tell him that you heard him on the Modern Selling podcast. Send a personalized connection request so that he knows exactly where you came from, which is very important. JD, I've got one last important question, and this is what I ask all my guests. So here you go. Your all-time favorite movie, what is it?
So it's an old classic. Actually, I love The Wizard of Oz, and I particularly like it for the end when Glinda the Good Witch says to Dorothy, "You have always had the power. You just had to see it for yourself." And she looked down and she saw the red shoes, and she was like, "Yep, I always had that capability here. I didn't realize it." And that's become sort of a life lesson for me in leadership, is that you've got the power. Go use it.
I love that. You've got the power. Go use it. Make 2025 an amazing year for your sales success. And for all of you listening in right now, hey, don't turn that dial quite yet. We've got this very important message for you right now.
Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Oh, and don't forget, if you'd like to save 20 hours or more in a month and increase your productivity, go right now and download Fly Message, that's flymsg.io, for free. It's your free text expander and personal writing assistant. Hey, thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.
Podcast.